Chapter 1. Shadows in the Rain. It was a night when the city of Greyshore seemed to weep. The rain fell heavily, turning the streets into neon-lit rivers and reflecting the dim lights from the lampposts. The sound of water beating against the windows of the third-floor office was almost comforting to Detective Jack Hartman. He was seated in his leather armchair, feet propped up on the desk, staring outside. His tired eyes revealed a past filled with struggles and unresolved mysteries. But nothing in his long career would prepare him for what was to come. Jack Hartman, a middle-aged man with stubble and eyes hardened by experience, was known for solving the most complicated cases. A former police officer, he now worked independently, taking on cases that the police ignored or couldn't solve. In Greyshore, this meant many cases. The clock struck midnight when the old phone on Jack's desk rang, its shrill sound cutting through the heavy silence of the office. Jack raised an eyebrow, surprised by a call at that hour. He answered with a voice hoarse and laden with fatigue. "Hartman, who's speaking?" The voice on the other end was female, trembling, filled with fear. "Detective Hartman, I need help. Something terrible is happening to me. My name is Alice Monroe. Please come meet me. I can't explain over the phone. It's about my portraits." Jack frowned. Portraits? Before he could ask anything more, the call ended. He stared at the phone for a moment, considering the strangeness of the situation. Something in that voice, that desperate plea, piqued his curiosity, and in his line of work, curiosity often kept a man alive, or led him to his death. Donning his old trench coat, Jack stepped out into the rainy night. The address Alice had given was in the city's artistic district, a place that contrasted with the rest of Greyshore. The streets were cleaner, but darkness still clung to every corner. Upon reaching the old building where Alice lived, Jack was greeted by an atmosphere heavy with mystery. He climbed the creaking stairs to the third floor, where a slightly open door awaited him. Jack knocked gently and entered. Alice's apartment was filled with canvases and brushes. The smell of paint was strong, almost suffocating. She stood in the middle of the room, a woman of ethereal beauty, but with eyes that showed sleepless nights. "Detective Hartman," she said, her voice a whisper. "Thank you for coming." Before Jack could respond, he noticed something that made his heart race. In the center of the room, a large portrait leaned against the wall. It was a self-portrait of Alice, but there was something deeply disturbing about the painting. Behind her image, emerging from the shadows, was an indistinct, shadowy face, with eyes that seemed to follow Jack wherever he moved. This face," Jack said, trying to process what he was seeing. "Who is it?" Alice looked at him, her face pale and marked by fear. "I don't know. It appeared in the painting 3 nights ago. Since then I feel like I'm being watched. Please, detective, I need you to find out who this man is and why he's haunting me." The rain continued to beat against the windows, but inside that apartment, Jack Hartman knew he had plunged into something much darker and more dangerous than any storm outside. And so, with a mystery involving art, fear, and an unknown face, Jack found himself ensnared in a web of shadows that promised to change his life forever. Chapter 2. The Unexpected Call. Morning light filtered through the blinds, casting stripes of light across the floor of Jack Hartman's office. The night had been long, filled with disturbing dreams of indistinct faces and moving shadows. He had barely slept, Alice Monroe's voice, and the sinister face in the portrait still echoing in his mind. With a cup of strong coffee in hand, Jack tried to organize his thoughts. He knew he needed to see Alice again and start unraveling the mystery as soon as possible. By noon, Jack was at Alice's apartment door. She opened it quickly, as if she had been expecting him. Her face looked even paler in the daylight, her eyes sunken from exhaustion and fear. "Thank you for coming so quickly, detective. I don't know what's happening, but I feel like I'm being watched all the time," Alice said, her voice trembling slightly. Jack entered, and this time he noticed something he had missed the night before. There were more paintings scattered around the room, all depicting Alice in different scenarios. But in each one, the same shadowy face appeared in the background, becoming clearer and more defined. "When did you first notice this face?" Jack asked, looking closely at one of the paintings. Alice sat down, crossing her arms as if trying to protect herself from the invisible cold of the room. "About a week ago. At first it was just a shadow, almost imperceptible. I thought it was my imagination, but it became clearer each day. And since then, I felt like I'm being watched, even when I'm alone." Jack nodded, absorbing every word. He knew he needed more information to understand what was happening. Taking a notepad from his coat pocket, he began asking questions. "Alice, I need you to tell me more about yourself. Your past, your family. Anything that might help me understand who could be trying to scare you like this." Alice hesitated for a moment, looking at the paintings as if seeking courage from them. "I grew up here, in Grayshore. My family. We were never very close. My parents died when I was young, under circumstances that were never very clear. I was raised by my aunt, who was also a painter. She taught me everything I know. But she had her secrets, too." Alice paused, as if deciding how much to reveal. "After she died, I found some old letters. They were from a man named Jonathan Blackwood. He and my aunt had a relationship, but he disappeared before I was born. I don't know if he's connected to this, but it's the only thing from the past that might be relevant." Jack noted everything, each detail potentially vital to solving the mystery. "I'll start there. I need to check this name, Jonathan Blackwood, and see what I can find. Stay safe, Alice. Lock your doors and windows, and don't let anyone in until I return." Alice nodded, fear clear in her eyes, but also a spark of hope. Jack left the apartment and began his search, heading to the one place he knew he could find information about a man who had disappeared so long ago: the archives of the Grayshore Police Department. It was a place he preferred to avoid, given his history with the department, but he knew it was necessary. Upon arrival, he was met with curious and some hostile looks from his former colleagues. But he had no time for personal confrontations. He headed straight to the records section and began searching for the name Jonathan Blackwood. After a few hours of searching through dusty pages, he found a file. Jonathan Blackwood, missing under mysterious circumstances. A man involved in shady dealings, with connections to influential figures in the city. The pieces were starting to fit together, but the picture was far from complete. Jack knew he was only beginning to scratch the surface of a much deeper and darker mystery. He tucked the file away, knowing he needed to investigate every detail. The face in the portrait wasn't just an apparition. It was a connection to a dangerous past, now resurfacing to haunt Alice Monroe. The rain began to fall again as Jack left the police department, his dark coat absorbing the droplets. He lit a cigarette and looked out at the city he knew so well, aware that every shadow could hide more than just darkness. Chapter 3. The First Clue. The cold wind of Grayshore cut through the air as Jack Hartman walked along the wet streets, clutching the dossier on Jonathan Blackwood firmly under his arm. He knew he was getting closer to something significant, but he needed more information. Alice's story and the appearance of that shadowy face were just the tip of the iceberg. Reaching the local cafe, a small haven for many of the city's artists and writers, Jack settled into a corner table. He ordered a black coffee, his faithful companion in all investigations. While waiting, he opened the dossier and began to read. Jonathan Blackwood had been an influential businessman, with many connections in Grayshore's underworld. Missing for 30 years, his absence left many rumors and few answers. Apparently, he had a close relationship with Alice's family, especially with her aunt, Margot Monroe. Jack reflected on what Alice had said. Margot was a talented painter, just like Alice. What could she have known about Blackwood and his disappearance? And how was this connected to Alice's portraits? Jack needed to learn more about Margot and her relationship with Blackwood. Determined to find answers, Jack left the cafe and headed to Margot's old studio, now abandoned, located in a more desolate part of the city. The place had an air of mystery, with broken windows and creaking doors. Entering the studio was like stepping into a portal to the past. The walls were covered in dust and cobwebs, but there were still paintings and art materials scattered around. At the back of the studio, he found an old chest, locked with a rusty padlock. With some effort, Jack managed to open the chest, and inside he found a collection of letters and photographs. The letters were passionate exchanges between Margot and Jonathan Blackwood, revealing an intense love, but also filled with secrets. One letter in particular caught Jack's attention. In it, Blackwood mentioned a masterpiece that Margot was creating, something he described as the key to our future. There was also a photograph of the two, with Blackwood holding a peculiar amulet, which seemed to emit a sense of unease. Jack pocketed the letters and the photograph, knowing these elements could be crucial to solving the mystery. He left the studio as the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the streets of Grayshore. He needed to show all this to Alice and hear what she had to say about the discoveries. Returning to Alice's apartment, he found her calmer but still worried. He spread the letters and the photograph across the table, watching her reaction. "Alice, I found these in your aunt's studio. It seems she and Jonathan Blackwood had a deep relationship, and it looks like he disappeared mysteriously. Have you ever seen this amulet before?" Alice looked at the photograph, her hands trembling slightly. "Yes, my aunt had an amulet like this. She said it was a symbol of protection, something she valued greatly. But she never talked much about Blackwood. I knew she had secrets, but I had no idea they were connected to him this way." Jack pondered over the new information. There was more than just an obsession on Blackwood's part. Something mystical or even supernatural seemed to be at play. "Alice, we need to find out what happened to this amulet and what it means. It might be the key to understanding what's happening to you and these paintings." Alice nodded in agreement. She knew Jack was her best chance to unravel the mystery and rid herself of the shadows surrounding her. Together, they decided to follow all the clues, aware that the journey would be dangerous, but necessary to find the truth. Night fell again in Grayshore, bringing with it more questions than answers. But Jack was determined to solve this case, not just for Alice, but also for the ghosts of the past that were beginning to haunt his own mind. Chapter 4. The sinister painting night fell over Grayshore, enveloped in a thick fog that seemed to suffocate the city. Jack Hartman returned to Alice Munro's apartment, his mind buzzing with the new discoveries. The amulet, the letters, the mysterious relationship between Margot and Jonathan Blackwood. Everything seemed intertwined in a web that was only beginning to reveal itself. Alice greeted him with an anxious look, her unease evident. Jack placed the dossier, the letters, and the photograph on the table, quickly recapping what he had found. They needed to understand what exactly the masterpiece mentioned by Blackwood in the letters meant. "Alice, show me the painting where you first saw the face," Jack requested. Alice nodded and led Jack to a corner of the apartment where the sinister painting stood. It was a portrait of herself, but in the shadows behind her image, the indistinct face was beginning to take shape. Jack approached, analyzing every detail. "This is really disturbing," he murmured. "It seems the face is getting clearer each day. Do you have any idea who it could be?" Alice shook her head, frustrated. "I don't know, Jack. I've never seen this man before, but I feel like he knows me. It's like he's watching me all the time." Jack studied the painting more closely. There was something peculiar about the technique, a detail he almost missed. At the base of the painting, almost invisible, was an inscription in Latin, "Quod sub umbra latet." He took out his notepad and wrote down the phrase. Quod sub umbra latet, he read aloud. It means, what lies beneath the shadow. It seems your aunt left a hidden message here. Alice looked at Jack, surprised. My aunt knew Latin, but I never imagined she would hide something like this in her paintings. Jack continued to examine the painting. There was a connection between the inscription, the face, and the amulet. Something Margot knew and was trying to reveal. He felt he needed to understand more about the context of the painting. Alice, do you have more paintings by your aunt? Anything that might give us more clues? Alice thought for a moment and then went to a cabinet, pulling out several canvases covered by white cloths. She laid them on the floor, one by one, revealing a series of paintings Margot had done before she died. These are some of her last works. I never fully understood their meaning, but maybe you'll see something I didn't. Jack began to examine each painting. In all of them, there were figures and faces that seemed to hide in the shadows, some more visible than others, but there was one in particular that caught his attention. It was a nighttime scene, with the silhouette of a figure holding the same amulet Jonathan Blackwood held in the photograph. Here it is again, Jack said, pointing to the figure. This amulet is clearly linked to all of this. We need to find out where it is now. Alice looked more confused than ever, but was determined to find answers. I've never seen this amulet personally, only in my aunt's things. Maybe there's something in her diaries that could help us. She kept detailed records of her works and thoughts. They spent hours combing through Margot's diaries, searching for any mention of the amulet or Jonathan Blackwood. Finally, in an old entry, they found something relevant. Margot mentioned an art gallery where she and Blackwood had frequently met, a place where they had hidden something important. The Nocturnal Gallery, Alice read aloud. It's a place my aunt mentioned a few times, but she never took me there. Jack knew this was the next step. They needed to go to the Nocturnal Gallery and discover what was hidden there. Perhaps finally, they would find the missing piece of the puzzle. The night wore on, but Jack and Alice felt they were getting closer to the truth. The mystery surrounding the paintings, the amulet, and Blackwood's disappearance was about to be revealed. And, with it, the danger lurking in the shadows of Greyshore. Jack prepared for what lay ahead, aware that each answer brought new questions, and that in Greyshore, nothing was as it seemed. Chapter 5. Visiting the Past. The sky over Greyshore was tinged with a threatening gray as Jack Hartman and Alice Munro got into the detective's old car, a 1957 Plymouth Belvedere. The engine roared, and they set off towards the Nocturnal Gallery, a place that might finally provide answers to the mystery enveloping them. As he drove through the rain-soaked streets, Jack couldn't help but think about the new clues. The amulet, the letters, the face in the painting. Everything seemed interconnected in a way he still couldn't fully grasp. Alice sat beside him, restless, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. "Jack, do you think we're being followed?" Alice asked, her voice filled with worry. Jack glanced in the rearview mirror and frowned. There was a dark car behind them, maintaining a constant distance. The rain made visibility difficult, but he noticed the headlights blinking twice. A signal? A warning? "Stay calm, Alice," Jack said, trying to disguise his own unease. "We'll figure out what's going on." He slowed down and turned onto a quieter side street. The dark car followed them, its headlights blinking again. Jack abruptly stopped the car, ready for anything. The car behind them also stopped. But before Jack could get out to confront the driver, the dark car made a sudden maneuver, turning into an alley and disappearing into the darkness. Jack paused for a moment, listening to the rain pounding on the car roof. Something was definitely wrong. He looked at Alice, who was visibly scared. "That's no coincidence," Jack muttered. "Someone doesn't want us to reach the Nocturnal Gallery." Determined not to be intimidated, Jack resumed driving, now more alert than ever. After a few minutes, They arrived at the address mentioned in Margot's diaries. The Nocturnal Gallery was an old building with a weathered facade and tall windows that offered a glimpse into its somber interior. They entered the building, and the atmosphere inside the gallery was heavy, almost oppressive. The dim lights and absolute silence created a sense of abandonment. But Jack knew this place held important secrets. Exploring the dusty corridors, they found a room at the back, locked with a rusty chain. Jack forced the door until the chain broke, revealing a small studio filled with paintings and sculptures covered by white chairs. The air was thick with the smell of paint and mold. In the center of the room, a pedestal held a glass case containing an amulet identical to the one in the photograph. Jack felt a chill run down his spine. He was closer to the truth, but also closer to danger. "Alice, this is the amulet your aunt mentioned in the letters," Jack said, carefully removing the glass case. "We need to find out its meaning." As they examined the case, Alice found a notebook hidden in a drawer. The pages were filled with Margot's notes about the amulet, describing it as an artifact of protection against dark forces. Margot believed the amulet had the power to reveal hidden truths, but also attracted those who sought its power for nefarious purposes. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed through the gallery's corridors. Jack and Alice froze, fear gripping them. Someone was there. "We have company," Jack whispered, quickly stashing the notebook and the glass case. "We need to get out of here." They sneaked through the corridors, trying to avoid making noise. They reached the back door and slipped into the alley, breathing a sigh of relief. But Jack knew they were being watched. The dark car, the footsteps in the gallery. Everything indicated that the enemy was closer than ever. Back in the car, Jack started the engine and sped away, determined to get Alice to a safe place before continuing the investigation. They had the amulet and Margot's notes, but they had also attracted the attention of dangerous forces. The night was just beginning, and Jack knew the path to the truth would be long and full of obstacles. But he was determined to protect Alice and solve the mystery, no matter the cost. As they drove through the dark streets of Grayshore, Jack couldn't help but keep an eye on the rear-view mirror, expecting at any moment to see the dark car appear again, its headlights blinking like a specter in the fog. Chapter 6. The Detective in Action. Jack drove in silence, his thoughts swirling like the rain pounding against the windshield. He needed to find a safe place for Alice. But first, they needed to grab a few things from her house. The feeling of being followed wouldn't leave him, and he glanced at the rear-view mirror every few seconds. They arrived at Alice's house, an old building with tall windows and a weathered facade. As Jack parked the car, he noticed something that made his heart race. The same dark car that had followed them earlier was parked across the street, its hazard lights flashing. "Alice, stay in the car. Lock the doors," Jack ordered, his eyes fixed on the suspicious car. "Jack, what are you going to do?" Alice asked, her voice filled with apprehension. "I'm going to see what's going on. Don't worry. I'll be fine." Jack stepped out of the car, closing the door behind him and cautiously walking towards the dark car. Rain dripped from his hat and coat, creating small streams on the sidewalk. He approached slowly, his hand ready to draw his gun at any moment. "Don't move! Stay where you are!" Jack shouted, bracing for any reaction from the driver. To his surprise, there was no response. The car was empty. Jack frowned, his heart pounding as he moved closer. He peered through the window and saw something that made his blood run cold. On the passenger seat, there was a painting covered by a cloth. Jack carefully opened the car door, pulling the cloth away to reveal the painting. It was another one of Alice's works, but this one was different. It depicted the facade of her house, with the same dark car parked in front, and in the window, an indistinct figure watched from inside. The precision of the details was chilling, as if the painting had captured the scene Jack had just witnessed. "Alice, come here," Jack called, keeping his eyes on the painting. Alice stepped out of the car, hesitant, and ran to him, holding an umbrella that did little to protect her from the torrential rain. When she saw the painting, her eyes widened in fear. "How is this possible? I didn't paint this. I swear, Jack." Jack looked around, feeling increasingly uneasy. Someone was playing with them, leaving disturbing clues and watching their every move. He needed to get Alice to a safe place immediately. "Let's go into your house, grab what you need, and get out of here," Jack said, trying to stay calm. They quickly entered Alice's house, which was dark and silent. Jack checked each room, ensuring there were no intruders. Alice grabbed some clothes and personal items, while Jack remained on high alert. "Jack, why would someone do this?" Alice asked, her voice trembling. "Someone wants to scare us, to destabilize us. But we won't let that happen. We need to keep investigating, find out who's behind this." With Alice's things in hand, they returned to the car, staying vigilant. Jack drove out of the city, heading towards an isolated motel he knew to be safe. During the drive, he reflected on the new pieces of the puzzle. They arrived at the motel, and Jack rented a discreet room, ensuring they would be off the radar for a while. While Alice settled in, he spread the paintings and notes on the bed, trying to make sense of everything. The painting left in the dark car was a clear sign they were being watched. Whoever was responsible knew exactly where they were and what they were doing. Jack knew he couldn't let his guard down for a moment. Sitting at the room's table, Jack devised a plan. He needed to find out more about the amulet, Jonathan Blackwood's connections, and the true intention behind Alice's paintings. Each clue took them deeper into a mystery that seemed endless. As the rain continued to fall outside, Jack and Alice knew they were just at the beginning of a long and dangerous journey. But together, they were determined to face any shadow that crossed their path until the truth was finally revealed. And so, with the promise of a sleepless night, Jack Hartman delved even deeper into the darkness surrounding Grayshore, prepared to uncover the darkest secrets and protect Alice from any threat that might arise. Chapter 7. The Truth Revealed. Dawn brought a faint, diffuse light, but inside the motel room, the atmosphere was still heavy with the weight of recent discoveries. Jack Hartman had barely slept, spending his hours trying to connect the dots between the amulet, the paintings, and Jonathan Blackwood's disappearance. Alice was equally exhausted, but determined to uncover the truth. Sitting at the table in the room, surrounded by Margot's paintings and notes, they began reviewing everything they had found. Margot believed the amulet had special powers, Jack said, reading one of the notes. She mentioned several times that it could reveal hidden truths. "Maybe this explains the changes in your paintings, Alice." Alice looked at the painting they had found in the dark car. The accuracy of the details was disturbing. "But how is this happening, Jack? I'm not painting these images consciously. It's like something or someone is controlling my hand." Jack knew they needed more information. He decided it was time to visit someone who might have answers. Dr. Victor Reynolds, an old colleague of Margot's and an expert on mystical artifacts, might help them understand the amulet and its possible effects. "We're going to visit an old friend," Jack said, picking up the phone to call Dr. Reynolds. "He can help us unravel this mystery." After a brief conversation, Dr. Reynolds agreed to meet them at his office, located in an old building in downtown Grayshore. Jack and Alice drove there, always on the lookout for any sign of danger. Dr. Reynolds's office was filled with old books, exotic artifacts, and paintings from various eras. Dr. Reynolds himself, a frail-looking man with bright, intelligent eyes, greeted them warmly. "Jack, it's good to see you again, and this must be Alice Munro," he said, shaking Alice's hand. "Let's get straight to the point. You mentioned something about an amulet and paintings that change on their own." Jack explained everything that had happened, showing the paintings and the amulet. Dr. Reynolds examined the amulet closely and then turned to a bookshelf filled with thick volumes. "This amulet is older than it appears," he said, flipping through a large book. "It's an artifact that, according to legend, can connect the bearer to supernatural forces. Margot was probably trying to use this power in some way." Alice was incredulous. "So, you're saying my aunt was involved with magic? This is surreal." Dr. Reynolds nodded. "Margot was always fascinated by the occult. She believed she could channel these forces through art. If your paintings are changing on their own, it could be a reflection of these energies." Jack frowned, absorbing the information. "And what about the face in the paintings? Who could it be?" Dr. Reynolds thought for a moment. "Jonathan Blackwood. If he had a deep connection with Margot and was involved with the amulet, his presence might be manifesting through the paintings. He could be trying to communicate something." Alice looked at Jack, fear and curiosity battling in her eyes. "What do we do now?" Jack knew they needed to delve deeper into this mystery, even if it meant confronting forces he barely understood. "We need to investigate Jonathan Blackwood's history further. There's something he's trying to tell us, and we need to find out what it is." Dr. Reynolds picked up another book, showing a passage about protection rituals. Margot might have been trying to protect something or someone. There could be a place where she hid important information. A safe place. Jack thanked Dr. Reynolds and, along with Alice, left the office. Their next stop was Margot's old house, a place that might hold the answers they were looking for. They arrived at Margot's house at dusk. The building was weathered by time but still held an air of mystery. They entered, and the familiar smell of paint and old wood enveloped them. Exploring the rooms, they found a secret room hidden behind a bookshelf. Inside, they discovered more paintings, notes, and a personal diary of Margot's. The diary pages revealed a plan to protect Alice from an unknown threat. "Margot knew something was coming," Jack said, reading the diary. "She wanted to protect you, Alice. And it seems Jonathan Blackwood was involved in something much bigger than we imagined." Alice held the diary, tears in her eyes. "My aunt was trying to protect me all this time. But from what?" Before they could continue, the sound of footsteps echoed through the house. Jack drew his gun, ready to face any threat. "Someone's here," he whispered, moving silently towards the door. The imminent confrontation promised to reveal even more secrets and bring dark truths to light. Jack and Alice were about to face the unknown, armed only with determination and courage, guiding them through the shadows of Grayshore. Chapter 8. Immediate danger. Night enveloped Grayshore in a shroud of darkness and mystery. Jack and Alice left Dr. Victor Reynolds' house with more questions than answers, but they now had a clear lead: Margot's house. It contained the secrets that could reveal the true danger Alice faced. Driving through the deserted city, Jack couldn't help but glance in the rearview mirror, expecting to see the dark car following them again. But the road was empty, except for the dancing shadows of trees illuminated by the headlights. They arrived at Margot's old house, an imposing and somber structure, covered in ivy and surrounded by ancient trees. The door creaked as it opened, and a heavy, musty air enveloped them as they entered. Jack turned on a flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness and revealing old furniture covered in dust and cobwebs. "Let's be quick," Jack said. "We need to find anything Margot might have hidden here." They began to scour the house, each room revealing more of Margot's past. In an old study, they found a safe hidden behind a bookshelf. With some effort, Jack managed to open the safe, revealing a collection of documents, a diary, and another painting. Alice took the diary and began to read while Jack examined the painting. It was a portrait of Margot and Jonathan Blackwood, featuring the same amulet they had previously found. The painting seemed to pulse with a strange, almost living energy. "Jack, listen to this," Alice said, her voice trembling. "Margot wrote that Jonathan was involved in an ancient cult, something about summoning entities from another dimension. She was trying to stop him, but he disappeared before she could do anything." Jack frowned, absorbing the information. That explains the amulet and its powers. Blackwood was trying to use the amulet to bring something into our world, and Margot tried to stop him. Now it seems someone is trying to continue what he started. Suddenly the sound of footsteps echoed through the house, interrupting their conversation. Jack turned off the flashlight and signaled Alice to stay quiet. The sound came from the entrance, firm and determined footsteps, as if they knew exactly where they were going. "We have company," Jack whispered, pulling Alice into a dark corner of the room. Shadows moved at the entrance, revealing a tall, hooded figure. Jack felt a chill run down his spine. Whoever it was, they weren't there by accident. "Let's get out of here now," Jack said, holding Alice's hand and guiding her to a side exit. They moved silently through the dark corridors, trying to avoid being seen. The sound of footsteps continued to follow them, a constant reminder of the danger surrounding them. They reached the back door and slipped into the garden, hiding among the trees while watching the house. The hooded figure entered the study they had just left, illuminating the room with their own flashlight. Jack watched, trying to understand who they were and what they were looking for. After a few minutes, the figure left the house, walking quickly to a car parked in front. "We need to find out who this person is," Jack said, his determination clear in his voice. They returned to Jack's car and began to follow the mysterious figure, keeping a safe distance. The car led them to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Grayshore, a place Jack knew well as a meeting point for illicit activities. "Stay here, Alice. I'm going to investigate," Jack said, getting out of the car and approaching the warehouse. He moved silently, each step calculated to avoid making noise. As he got closer, he heard voices inside the warehouse, speaking in low but urgent tones. He managed to peek through a broken window, seeing the hooded figure handing the amulet to an imposing man with scars on his face and a cold look. "We need to finish what Blackwood started," the man said, holding the amulet reverently. "With this, we will bring the power," he promised. Jack knew he was at a crossroads. He needed to act quickly to stop the plan from proceeding, but he also needed to ensure Alice's safety. He returned to the car and explained the situation to Alice, who was visibly scared but determined to help. "We need to go in and get the amulet back. We can't let them continue with this," Alice said, her voice firm. Jack agreed, outlining a plan to infiltrate the warehouse and retrieve the amulet. He knew the fight would be tough, but he was willing to face any danger to protect Alice and prevent the nefarious plan from going forward. With one last look of determination, Jack and Alice prepared to enter the warehouse, aware that the imminent confrontation would be crucial to unraveling the mystery and preventing a greater catastrophe. The night was still dark, but Jack felt that the truth was finally within his reach, ready to be revealed. Chapter 9. The Final Confrontation. The night was darker than ever as Jack and Alice approached the abandoned warehouse. The tension in the air was palpable, and Jack knew they were about to face danger head-on. He checked his gun, ensuring it was ready, and signaled for Alice to stay close to him. "Stay behind me. We need to move quickly and quietly," Jack murmured, his eyes fixed on the warehouse entrance. They entered through the back doors, moving between piles of crates and abandoned equipment. The sound of voices grew louder as they approached the center of the warehouse. Shadows danced on the walls, cast by dim lights hanging from the ceiling. Suddenly, one of the gang members noticed Jack and Alice's presence. He drew a gun, but Jack was quicker. With a swift movement, he disarmed the man and knocked him out with a precise punch. The fight had begun. Another man charged at Jack, brandishing a knife. Jack dodged the attack, grabbing the attacker's arm and twisting it until he heard the crack of bones breaking. A third man tried to grab Jack from behind, but Alice, with unexpected courage, picked up a piece of wood and struck the attacker on the head, knocking him down. "Well done, Alice," Jack said, breathing heavily. The gang leader, the scarred man, noticed the commotion and shouted orders to his henchmen. "Kill them! Don't let them take the amulet!" The fight intensified. Jack faced two men at once, blocking punches and delivering precise kicks. The sound of bodies colliding echoed through the warehouse, mixed with cries of pain and furious commands. One of the henchmen managed to land a blow on Jack, who stumbled back, tasting blood in his mouth. But he quickly recovered, grabbing an iron bar and using it to disarm and take down his attacker. Alice, on the other hand, defended herself as best as she could. Another henchman attacked her, but she used her agility to dodge the blows, finding an opportunity to deliver a strong kick to the man's groin, causing him to fall to his knees in agony. The gang leader, realizing his men were losing, drew a gun and aimed it at Jack. "Enough!" he shouted. "Drop the weapon or she dies!" Jack stopped, his eyes fixed on the leader. Alice was within range of the gun, and he knew any wrong move could cost her life. He slowly lowered the iron bar, trying to buy time. "What do you want with this amulet?" Jack asked, trying to distract the leader. The leader smiled, a cold and cruel smile. "Power, the same power Jonathan Blackwood sought, and you won't stop me from getting it." Before the leader could react, Alice made a bold move. She grabbed one of the crates next to her and threw it at the leader, distracting him for a crucial moment. Jack seized the opportunity and lunged forward, knocking the leader down with a powerful blow. The gun slipped from the leader's hand, skidding across the floor. Jack dived for it, but one of the remaining henchmen attacked him, trying to prevent him from getting the gun. The ensuing struggle was brutal. Jack and the henchman rolled across the floor, exchanging punches and blows, each fighting for the gun. Finally, Jack managed to break free, grabbing the gun and aiming it at the gang leader, who was slowly getting up, still dazed from the blow. "It's over, hand over the amulet," Jack said firmly. The gang leader, realizing he was defeated, cast a furious glance at Jack, but knew he had no choice. He pulled the amulet from his pocket and threw it to Jack. "This won't stop what's coming," he said with a dark smile. "Blackwood isn't finished. He will get what he wants, with or without this amulet." Jack caught the amulet, feeling the weight of responsibility in his hands. He knew the fight was far from over, but for now, they had won a small victory. "Let's get out of here, Alice," Jack said, carefully pocketing the amulet. "We need to find a safe place and figure out how to stop this plan." They left the warehouse, leaving behind the injured henchmen and the defeated leader. The night was quiet, but Jack knew the real danger was still to come. Blackwood was somewhere, plotting his next move, and Jack needed to stay one step ahead. The road ahead was long and full of challenges, but Jack and Alice were ready to face them together. With the amulet in hand and the determination to uncover all the secrets, they set off, ready for the next stage of their journey in the shadowy Greyshore. Chapter 10. Conclusion and Reflection. The night was nearly over when Jack and Alice arrived at his apartment, exhausted but relieved to be safe, at least for now. The confrontation at the warehouse had been intense, but they had secured the amulet and learned more about Jonathan Blackwood's plan. Now, they needed to figure out how to stop it. In the apartment, Jack placed the amulet on the table and began examining Margot's notes and diary. Alice sat beside him, holding a cup of hot coffee, trying to fend off the exhaustion and fear that had plagued her in recent days. "Jack, what are we going to do now?" Alice asked, her voice still trembling. Jack looked at her, determination in his eyes. "We're going to figure out how to destroy this amulet, or at least neutralize its power. Margot must have left some clue on how to do that. She knew Blackwood better than anyone." They spent hours poring over the pages of Margot's diary, searching for any mention of a method to destroy or neutralize the amulet. Finally, they found a passage that mentioned a protection and destruction ritual, a last resort Margot had discovered. "Here it is," Jack said, pointing to the page. "Margot describes a ritual that can break the bond between the amulet and any entity it's connected to. We need specific ingredients and a safe place to perform it." Alice read the passage carefully, her heart racing. "I know a place that might be safe. There's an old abandoned chapel outside the city near the forest. My aunt used to go there to meditate and paint. We can try it there." Jack nodded, knowing they had no other choice. "Let's do it. Grab what you need, and let's go immediately." They arrived at the abandoned chapel at dawn, the faint light of the rising sun giving the place an even more mysterious aura. The chapel was in ruins, but still held an air of serenity and power. Jack and Alice prepared the site as described in Margot's diary, placing the amulet in the center of a circle of candles and herbs. They recited the ritual's words together, their voices echoing off the stone walls of the chapel. Suddenly, an invisible force filled the air, making the candles flicker violently. The amulet began to glow, emitting an intense light that momentarily blinded them. Jack felt a growing pressure around them, as if something was resisting the ritual. "Keep going, Alice! Don't stop!" Jack shouted, holding her hand firmly. Alice stayed focused, reciting the words with greater determination. The amulet's light grew stronger, and then, with a thunderous sound, it exploded into 1,000 pieces, scattering light and shadows throughout the chapel. The air became lighter, and a sense of relief and peace filled the place. "We did it, Jack. We did it," Alice said, tears of relief streaming down her face. Jack smiled, feeling the weight of danger finally lifting. "Yes, we did. But that doesn't mean our fight is over. Blackwood might have other ways to achieve his goal. We need to stay vigilant." They returned to the car and drove back to Greyshore, the sun beginning to illuminate the city. Jack knew that although they had won this battle, the war against the shadows and secrets of Greyshore was far from over. But for now, they had achieved an important victory. On the way, Jack reflected on everything they'd been through in Ai. Everything had been through Daus Saus, Sakri Nine Naus. Thursa Days thrown to go the Ritrij. The others side seen lie the fights the mysteries, and Alice's determination to face her fears. He knew that together they could face any challenge that came their way. Arriving at the apartment, Jack looked at Alice and smiled. "You were amazing, Alice. I don't know what I would have done without you." Alice smiled back, still tired but relieved. "I don't know what I would have done without you, Jack. Thank you for everything." They knew they needed to rest and prepare for whatever came next, but for now, they could enjoy a moment of peace, knowing they had faced the shadows and emerged victorious. And so, with the sun illuminating Greyshore and driving away the last shadows of the night, Jack Hartman and Alice Munro were ready for the next chapter of their lives, determined to face any mystery or danger that came their way.